Hey everybody, Dave here. Today, I'm going to automate rpachallenge.com in Blue Prism for the third time, but I promise there's a good reason for it. The first time that I did it, it was in order to build a full, robust process that I would feel comfortable putting into production. The second time, which I ended up calling the streamlined version, was just to show how would you automate rpachallenge.com in Blue Prism if you were just going to build it all in a single action in an object. That more closely mimicked what I do and have done in the other RPA tools. The reason we're doing this again is that I discovered two features that I didn't know about before in Blue Prism. One of them is XPath Expressions. Now I kind of knew this existed. I just didn't realize how versatile and useful it can be. The other feature is something that was actually introduced in 6.9, the CSS Selectors attribute. Here's the thing. This actually dramatically improves the capability we have to spy elements in Blue Prism. I don't know if it's possible to overstate how amazing this is. I have been able to automate websites in the past with Blue Prism using some excessively complex techniques just to make it work. Not that Blue Prism didn't have the functionality exactly, it's just that it was a really difficult website and the features I was aware of in Blue Prism just did not work for it super well. I did end up getting it to work, but it was very difficult. Both of these features, the XPath Expressions and CSS Selectors put together, make a fantastic improvement to application modeler features in Blue Prism. So let's use those two features this time when we automate rpachallenge.com in Blue Prism. As I always do in these RPA Challenge videos, I like to point out a couple things before we start. The first thing I want to show you is the website itself. And then the second thing I'll show you is the changes that I made to the input Excel spreadsheet that we use to enter data into this web page. rpachallenge.com is a free website that you can go to and just have fun practicing your automations. You can challenge yourself and challenge your RPA tool to see if it's possible to automate this web page. Now, this is not your average everyday web page. It's a little different. So let me show you how. The first thing I want to point out is that so you could automate downloading this Excel spreadsheet, but I typically don't. I manually download this Excel spreadsheet by clicking on this button. And then what I do is make a few changes to it. And then once you have that saved somewhere locally on your desktop, then you design an automation to first click start and you see it changed the button to say round one. And then what you may or may not have noticed, these fields changed location. So you'll see as I click submit that the locations of the labels and their associated input fields will change location on the page. And this happens every single time you click submit or reload the page. And the idea here is that the RPA tool needs to be capable of adjusting to find those fields wherever they are on the page. It can be a little bit challenging because these input text fields don't necessarily have an ID associated with them or a specific name that tells you this text field is the first name field. Now I'm going to show you in a little bit that that's not actually the case. There is some detail inside of this text field that tells you what it is. But the point is you specifically cannot use absolute XPaths to identify where these fields are because it changes each time you reload the page. So you click submit. Let's say you're typing in all this data row by row from the Excel spreadsheet. And then you get to the end, it's going to tell you your success rate. It actually checks the input that you typed into the fields to verify whether you entered the right data or not. The next thing I want to point out is the changes that I made to the Excel spreadsheet. If you click this download Excel button, you'll get a spreadsheet that looks like this called challenge. And then I've put that locally in my C drive in a test folder. I'm going to open up that spreadsheet and show you a couple things that I changed. I did one thing up here, which is to change the last name field from having a space at the end to not having a space at the end because that would break the automation. The other thing is that I actually manually deleted this H column and it was empty already, but it looks like there used to be data in it. So when you retrieve the data from Excel, it gives you an extra field. So I right click and hit delete. Last thing that I did is I selected all of the cells that are below this last data filled row and I did Control Shift and hit the down arrow key. It's going to select everything, right click and hit delete. There must have been data in these rows in the past, and so it thinks there's data there now. So I've just manually deleted that, and you can see they're empty now. So when I go and retrieve the collection into Blue Prism, it's going to only pull this data. I'm going to now create an object. I'm going to call this object RPA Challenge version 3. Check the box. And now here we are in our object. First, let's go ahead and just rename this action like we did before. RPA Challenge. We're going to do everything inside of this one action. Not best practice, but we're just trying to get it done to make it more in comparison to how I do it in other RPA tools just for kind of demo purposes. I'm going to first get some data from Excel. Let's drag an action stage, and I'm going to change this to point to the MS Excel VBO. We're going to want open workbook, and we're going to leave the handle empty because it's going to create one for us. I'm going to hard code C:\test\challenge.xlsx. We're going to output the workbook name. I'm going to copy this stage and duplicate it, open the duplicate up, and then I'm just going to change the action to get worksheet as collection fast. This will just give me a collection from whatever sheet is open at the time. And I'm going to hit this store in button to create the data collection. And the last thing that I need to do is to close the spreadsheet. Let's just close all instances to make it easy. No outputs. I'm done. Okay, so that is getting data from Excel. I'm going to run this really quick to make sure that it works. And here's our data inside of the collection and current values. Looks good. Let's go ahead and kind of plan out what we're going to do by dragging some stages onto here. And then that will help me know sort of which elements I want to spy. So the first thing I know I want to do, because of some issues I've been having lately with Chrome automation in Blue Prism, I'm actually going to bring on here an action from the utility environment VBO to kill the Chrome process before we open it. I don't know that it's 100% necessary, but it definitely makes my life easier when that's the case. Now that's going to kill all my Chrome windows. So then we're going to launch Chrome, and it's going to go to the, I can go ahead and drag this over here, application root. We haven't created an application model yet, so I may have to come back in here and change this. This is kind of just a placeholder. So I want to launch, and then I'm going to wait for the start button so that I know that I want these stages. Launch failed is what we'll call this. We'll call this a system exception, and we'll just say launch failed. And we're going to end up choosing the start button there. So then I want to click the start button. Click start. We don't have an application element to use yet. And we can't connect this yet because we don't have a node inside this conditional wait. After we've clicked start, we want to loop through the data. So let's name this loop data. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a navigate stage, and I'm going to put a lot of rows into it. You don't have to do it this way, but I'm going to do it like this for now. Let's type values into fields. And we're going to end up adding a lot of rows to this. Let me just go ahead and click OK for now. And then the next thing we want to do is click submit. So let's rename this submit. We'll end up putting the submit button in there. And after that, the last thing I want to do is I kind of want to make sure that Chrome is completely closed at the end. So we're going to kill the Chrome process. And what we'll do right before that, though, is terminate, which is really the way of closing. Okay, so I still can't. I'm going to have to come back in here and change that. Terminate Chrome. I could just close Chrome, but some of the difficulty that I've been running into lately, it doesn't actually matter how I close Chrome unless I do it a specific way. And so I'm just going to go with the easiest way, which is let's just close the Chrome window and then kill the process, and we're good to go after that. Now, I'm not going to put this in the main flow because I'm going to set this off to the side, and I'll just end up setting next stage and running that. Once I've kind of done a test, I've looked at the results, and then I'll run this in order for it to close Chrome for me. So we've got kind of everything laid out. I don't think we're missing anything, but we'll have to see. I'm going to go into Application Modeler and start building that out. I'll leave the application name the same. I'll choose browser-based application, and it's going to be a browser that is launched from an executable. Let's browse and go to Google, Chrome, application, chrome.exe. Next, here's where we'll type http://challenge.com. I also am going to go ahead and type two other things in case I need them. Force renderer accessibility and also incognito, because I want this to open in incognito mode. That helps whenever you decide to close Chrome by killing the process. It's kind of useful to use incognito so that the restore pages pop-up doesn't happen, and there's some other benefits to it as well. Next, all the way to the end. Now, the fun part. I'm going to click launch over here. It'll launch the window for me. And it might take a second. What happened here? Someone has challenged you. Now, before we launch this, I realized I typed in the address wrong. So we need to go to rpachallenge.com, not challenge.com. That's something completely different. So I'm going to click launch, and it's going to launch my Chrome in incognito mode, and it should connect. Yep, so we are connected to it now, and eventually this page will load. There we go. I'm going to click identify on this first element. We're going to choose first name, hold Control, left click, and we'll name this first name. Now, here's what we need to do. We're going to create one element, and then we're going to make the rest of them match that element. Let's go ahead and, well, actually, you know what? We'll go ahead and spy all of them and then make them all match. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I created 7 elements. I'm going to go with the first one, identify, spy last name. And then the next one, wait, let's rename this last name. Next one, identify phone number. Phone number. Email, identify email. The next one is address, identify address. The next one we'll go with is company name, identify company name. The next one is role in company, identify role in company. Now we've got all these elements spied. What I'll show you first is that this is what's known as an absolute XPath. It's the full path from the top all the way down to the input at the very bottom. And what we don't want is to use this because this breaks. I'll show you highlight. It works right now. But if I go to the web page and click submit, try to use it again, it's not going to work. It's going to fail. And even if I only used the web name and web ID or whatever, all of those will break. So I'm going to uncheck all of these. And I'm actually going to do something a little different. I'm going to uncheck every single one of these that were checked already. I'm going to scroll down to the Web CSS Selector. I'm going to check that, hit the match column, so it's at the top. We're going to use only this attribute. Isn't that exciting? I should mention that this could be more complex, maybe in other web pages, and you need more complex CSS selectors. I'm not an expert in that. In fact, I know very little about it. And so I think if I can learn something in a matter of an hour, you can too. So let's just use this pattern that I've discovered. I want you to practice it too and see if you can make it work in some of your objects, and let me know how it goes. But this is how you do it. So check just Web CSS Selector and have the match type set to equal, and then have value as empty for now. And we're going to go get some stuff and put it in there. I'm going to click over to the web page. And what I'm going to do is hit either F12, or you can go up here and click the 3 vertical dots, go down to More Tools, and then click Developer Tools. Both of those, F12 or doing that, will bring up this. What this is showing me is a representation of the HTML of the page. So there's a lot here. Please don't take the time to try to look through this manually. What you want to do is go to the top left. There's an inspect button. This inspect button is very similar to the identify button in Blue Prism's application modeler. So click that. And then as you mouse over fields, it's like what you'd expect. It's going to kind of highlight the various fields that you can spy. So I'm going to go to the first name field and click it. And what it's doing is bringing me to the HTML that's specifically for that element. Now, ignore all the extra stuff around here and try to just pay attention to the highlighted portion. In this case, what I'm going to do is look for something that tells me this is the first name field. And so that's what I see right here. It says label first name. If I go and click inspect again and choose any of the other ones, let's say role and company, and then I look at this one, when I look at the same attribute, it says label role. So I can see already that they are different for each field. And that means I might not need an anchor feature in order to uniquely identify each input field without doing some complex thing like I did last time. So what I'm going to do is use this ngReflectName attribute to identify this specific field. So what I'm going to do is go to what it highlighted, and I'm going to right click on it and go to copy. And this might be, let me get out of the way. There we go. Okay, so click copy element, and then let's go back over to application modeler, and I'm going to click into the first name element. I'm going to go to the notes tab just so I have a little bit more space to work with. And let's paste what we copied. Now, what this is the same HTML that you would have seen over here. And I'm going to delete the things that we don't need. So I can already tell that I don't know what this attribute is, but it's not going to be useful to me. I'm going to get rid of that. Then I'm also going to get rid of the ID attribute and the name attribute and the class attribute, because all of those either change at runtime or are not unique to this specific element. So I'm going to delete those. I'm also going to delete the angle brackets that are before and after. And now we're left with this is almost it. I mean, this is very close to being done as our CSS selector. We have to do a couple things to this though. The pattern is that the type of field that this is, which this one tells me this is an input field, that type of field has to be at the very beginning. Right after that, you want a square bracket to open. At the very end, you're going to want a close bracket, square bracket. Then make sure, I'm going to remove the spaces just because I don't know if it's necessary. Then you take the attribute name, which is kind of like a field name inside of the element. That attribute name, you just leave it right here, just after the open square bracket. Then have an equal sign. After the equal sign, put single quote around this value. So I think it has double quote to begin with. So put single quote. Maybe it would work with double quote. I don't know. But when I look it up, the CSS selector examples, I'll show single quotes. All right, so that's it. That is our CSS selector. Would you believe that's going to work? Let's test it. Let's copy this, go to attributes. I'm going to paste it in here. So we've got Web CSS Selector equals this. Input, here's the field name or the attribute name, and the value that is assigned to that attribute in this case. Oh man, here we go. Oh wait, let's close this and hit highlight. Oh, it worked. Okay, so here's what we can do. I'm gonna have to go find out what this value is for every single field. So let's just click around a little bit and kind of glance at what each one is and then set up the rest of these elements. I'm gonna go back over to here. I'm gonna hit F12 and then hit the inspect button. Click the company name one. This one is label company name, so that's easy. Inspect. Label last name, label phone. So this one's not phone number, it's just label phone. We got to remember that. Email. This one is label email. That's easy. Role and company. We already saw this one before. This is label role instead of label role and company. So far the phone number one is just phone and role and company is just role. Let's click inspect, and then address is the last one. So this is label address. So we can basically just go into application modeler and let's copy the element mask of this first one and then paste it onto the rest of them. So right now, last name looks like this. I'm going to right click, paste element mask. So what it should do is make the match column similar to what first name is, and it will even change some of the values a little bit, but for the most part, it's going to leave it empty like it did here. And that's what I want. Let's go ahead and paste element mask onto the rest of these. Saves me a few clicks. Okay, and then let's go back to last name, and we want to paste what we had before. Let's just put in last name, go to phone number, paste that in, change this to phone, email, label email address. Change this to label address. And then change this one to company name. And the last one, if we remember right, it's going to be just label role. And that's it for the input fields. We could go through and check all of them, but I know they all work. And if it breaks at runtime, we'll come back and fix it. Let me add a few other elements. And I'll need to show you one more thing. So let's click element. I know that I'm going to want to spy the whole window because I need to activate Chrome to bring it to the foreground. So let's do identify. Let's change this to show Win32 mode, select the whole window, and then I'm just going to deselect all of these visible, screen visible, and enabled. And the only ones left are these two. I'm going to go ahead and just rename this window. Add element. I know that I want to spy the start button. Let's hit identify, spy the start button. I also want to spy the submit button. Now, I'm going to go ahead and type this here because it's fun to me. I'm going to copy the element mask again and paste it onto, oh, I forgot to rename this one. This was submit. This one is similar. Let me just reorder this. Okay, let me go grab this. So the submit button is not an input field. If I go back over to developer tools, hit inspect and click on submit, this is going to tell me that this is, oh, it is an input. Okay, well that's fine then. We're not going to use the same CSS selector though, because in this case, I'd say the best thing for us to use is value submit, because I think that there aren't any other inputs that have a value of submit. So let's go back over here and change. So this is going to be submit. Excuse me, this is going to be input. We need to change it. Instead of using ng reflect name, I'm going to just type value because it matches over here. Let me change the second part and then I'll compare them. Submit. All right, so we've got input value equals submit. So I look in here, I find an element that is of type input, and it has an attribute named value that has a value of submit. And that's how we get this. Now let's just make sure it works. Okay, it's hard for you to see because orange and red are very similar to each other, but it did highlight it just then. It would have thrown up an error if it didn't. Now, the last thing we need to do, I think this is the last thing we want to do, is the start button. This one's a little bit different. Let me show you why. If I go into developer tools, click inspect, and I click on the start button, it's going to bring me to what I'd expect, which is to see that this is of type button, but this class, this attribute right here and the class attribute are the only things here. And this doesn't look particularly useful to me as far as uniquely identifying this button. But what does uniquely identify it is the text that's right here, the start text. So you can kind of see this first part is like the beginning of the button, and this last part closes the button. What's between them is literally the text that's going to show on the page. I want to find an element that has the word start. Now, there could be other elements on the page that say start, of course. And so I could adjust my technique for identifying it at that point. But right now, I know that there are no other elements that just say the word start. Let's go to our start element. This time we're going to deselect everything except for webpath/XPath. Okay, so we've only got XPath selected. We are not going to use all of this stuff. In fact, we're probably going to delete most or all of it. The way we're going to do this is we know this is a button, and we know that the text inside of it is start. So let's delete everything here. Now, I've looked up the syntax ahead of time, and that's the only reason that I know it. So I recognize this is somewhat technical, but if I can find it, I know that you can find it because I did not know these things ahead of time. So I'm going to type button because that's the type of element I'm working with. This is going to be similar to that CSS selector. I'm going to hit open and close square brackets. Inside of that, I'm going to type text because this is the we're looking at the text that's in the button, right? Equals single quotes around start. Now we're almost there. At this point, we have what looks very similar to the CSS selector, right? We're going to put a forward slash at the beginning, and then we're going to put actually a second forward slash at the beginning. What this tells it is, hey, look for a button element that has a text of start anywhere on the page by having 2 forward slashes as opposed to 1. Now, there's one more change we have to make, and I can't explain to you why this is, but it's a thing. So because there's not actually an attribute named text, I guess it's more like a function. So I'm going to open and close parentheses after this word text. So it's kind of like a little function. I guess that's what we're going for here. And so we've got 2 forward slashes, button, and then inside of open and close square brackets, we have text, open, close parentheses, equals, and then start inside of single quotes. That was a lot of words, but honestly, that's not that complex, right? You could adjust that. If you had another button on the page, then you just change the text right here, and you could just use this pattern over and over and over again for all the buttons on the page. And it is performant, let me tell you. You can't see it right now, but it highlights it immediately. When you use the XPath and the CSS selectors, the performance is actually pretty amazing. I'm going to click OK. We're back in the object now, and I'm going to go plug in those elements that I just created into each of these stages. So let's go to the launch stage and drag in the root node. We've got launch selected here. Okay, there we go. So we've got launch selected, and I'm going to leave all this stuff empty at the bottom because it should just use what's in application modeler. I'm not going to pause after this step because instead of an arbitrary wait, I'm going to use a conditional wait to look for the start button and the parent document to be loaded. This is a relatively new feature that used to be in Internet Explorer, and now it's in Chrome automation as well. This will wait for the button to appear and also wait for the whole page to load before it allows the process flow to continue. So let's type start button. I'm going to change this wait to 15 seconds because sometimes this web page takes a while to load. Let's link this in to the start button, make it straight up and down for my OCD, and then let's open up this click start, drag the start button in. We want to click this. And do we want to pause after this? I guess we could do a short pause of 1 second. I could put another conditional wait in here to look for something, but I think we've already proved that we can do it here, so I'm just going to leave it out for now. We are going to loop through this data, so that's already good. The first thing that I want to do is bring the application to the foreground to make sure that we can type keys into it and stuff. Let's drag the window element over, change the action to activate application, and then I'm going to put, I think I can put a wait of like 0.2 seconds, and we'll see how well that works. After this, I'm going to create a bunch of rows, and we're going to fill it out. But let's just do 2 at a time. I'm going to drag first name over twice. The first one is going to be to focus, to set focus into the field. The second one is going to do global send keys to send some data over to it. And what I want to do is use the collection data, its first name field, data.firstname. Because you remember, we are looping through that data collection, and so we'll be on 1 row at a time. So I can just reference it with dot notation, data.firstname. And then the interval, I'm actually going to leave empty and let it just type as fast as it wants. The next thing is I'm going to add 2 more rows, and we're going to go to each element and do the same thing over and over again. Data.lastname. Add 2 more rows. Phone number. Focus. Global send keys. Data.phone number. Add 2 more rows. Drag email over. Choose focus. Global send keys. Data.email. 2 more rows. Address. Focus. I didn't drag address over twice. Okay. Global send keys. Data.address. Have you fallen asleep yet? Add. Company name. Focus. Global send keys. data.company name. 2 more rows, and our last field. Focus, global send keys, data.role in company. Click OK. And then we could have added submit at the end of that, but I decided to make it a separate stage. Let's put submit into this one and choose click. Do we want to wait for a short period of time after this? We probably should. Let's just do like a 0.5 second wait after this. That way, each time it clicks submit, there will be a small wait afterward. Again, we could do a conditional wait, but we're just trying to get this done. And let's hit reset, which is also going to check for errors. It looks like I did something wrong. Row 1 contains an argument. Which field, which one is this? Oh, right. It's probably because I kind of messed it up by not creating an application model at first. So I'm going to delete this row, click remove, add the row back, drag this back over, click launch, and then we should be good to go now. Let's hit errors. Oh, we got one more error. Failed to find referenced application element in row 1. Oh, same thing here. So we're going to have to, oh, I didn't actually fix this one. Let's drag this over, click on terminate, and that looks good. Check for errors one more time. There's only warnings left. I'm not worried about those. Okay, let's go ahead and close. And we just terminated, and then we also killed the process. Let's reset. I'm going to turn this up to full speed, and let's run it and see how it goes. All right, so it's obviously got the data already. You can't quite see it moving over on the left because when you run it at full speed, the UI is not going to update fast enough for all the stuff it's doing. Okay, so we just did the first row, and it looks like it's putting everything into the right places. You can see it's running relatively fast. I mean, it's immediately finding all the fields. So it looks like this was a success. That wasn't too bad, right? Now, I do think that an anchor feature would be useful in Blue Prism. However, I don't think the need is as great as I originally thought it was. Originally, I thought, well, how am I going to automate some websites without an anchor feature? But now that I see that the CSS Selector is there, we also have the XPath Expressions to use, and I only showed you a basic example. Let me tell you, I was looking this up. There are a lot of ways to use this. There's a lot of different types of stuff you can do inside of the expressions. So our success rate is 100%, and we are good to go now. That was it. So what did you think? Did you think it was too hard? Be honest with me. Do you think the XPath Expressions and the CSS Selectors is really difficult? Personally, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, here's what I think though. An improvement to Blue Prism could be, we could use an anchor feature, right? But like with the CSS Selectors and the XPath Expressions, it's not that big of a deal. But here's what an improvement that I think we could have done in Blue Prism is that this Web CSS Selector, it would be really nice if somehow we could add some extra attributes here and the extra fields that appear inside of various elements, the extra attributes, I should say, will automatically be dynamically created over here. Now, I don't know that that's viable. That might not make sense in Blue Prism based upon how Application Modeler works. But kind of like how there's Web Class and Web Client Y and Web ID, if these could be dynamically generated in Blue Prism, I think that would be pretty awesome. In the worst case though, right, we've got Web CSS Selector, so we can type it in manually. The only problem there is we have to go look at the HTML of the page to figure these things out. And personally, I don't mind that. But I know that when we compare it to some other RPA tools, we're all immediately going to ask, well, why is it easy in another tool when it's not in this one? And that's really the only reason I would suggest the change at all. Because I think that at this point, I don't know that there's any website that I can't automate except for ones that are intentionally designed to make RPA break. So let me know in the comments what you think of these two techniques. Personally, I think they are earth-shattering. I think this makes a huge difference in Blue Prism automation, especially in complex websites, because both of these methods are extremely performant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.